Hey guys, it's Mandy. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to take a minute to thank my patrons. You are the ones making this possible. You are the ones keeping restorative grief both on the airwaves and in the lives of people who need grief support and a better understanding of how to support themselves through their losses. So if you're interested in joining us, you can visit my website, mandykpart.com, for all the links to check out the premium episodes and premium content that are available to you by becoming a patron. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 87, titled It's a Fully Human Experience with Jan Owen. This week, we are talking with trauma therapist and grief specialist Jan Owen. After losing her husband to a rare form of cancer in 2014, she recognized her need for more support at the intersection of grief and trauma. Most therapy programs are not well versed in grief education, so that industry is woefully unsupported. And so Jan's work as a therapist, author, and grief educator invites each of us to emotionally unpack all the complexities in our loss and the way that it intertwines with every aspect of our lives in a very intentional but also casual way. A moment of content warning. This conversation also includes multiple brief comments about death by suicide and mental illness. So please listen with discretion. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal ideation, please reach out. You don't have to fight for hope alone. Well, welcome back, everybody, to Restorative Grief. This week, my guest is Jan Owen. She is a grief and trauma therapist, a published author. Your book, Fighting Forward, A Widow's Journey from Loss to Life, is beautiful, and a collection of essays from being widowed at a young age. And, we were just talking off the air about all of the things that motivate you to do this grief and trauma work, because it's a very complicated and difficult scene to take in. It's a field that we kind of stumble into after our own losses. And so I'm grateful that you're here and willing to share some of what brought you here and what your experience is.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I actually do enjoy these conversations and just getting a chance to talk about what's really precious to me.
Yeah.
Something I don't often get to do, I guess, with colleagues or with people outside of the therapy office. So, not
Yeah.
everyone wants to talk about death and bereavement, right?
It's true. We completely avoid it because it's really uncomfortable and there are no answers. As you said earlier off air, it's not pathologized. There's nothing simple about grief.
No.
So let me just give you the floor and say, like, tell me a little bit about your work that you do and what it is that makes you the kind of person who can say, "Oh, I really love connecting with people at their hardest moments."
My background is I was in ministry for many years. I was a worship pastor.
Mhm.
And so I spent many, many years sort of involved as a side, I guess, as a part of my job, right, in pastoral care, right? So
Mhm.
in that position, I was in the hospital. I was with people when we took them off life support.
Mm.
Didn't have really any training because I was a worship pastor. So, I just sort of fell into that part. But my personality is such that I have always been really sensitive to other people's emotions and really, really tuned in. I've done a lot of care in my own family for elderly family members. Really never thought much about it, right? Never really thought, oh, that makes me any different than anyone else. I just thought that's what you were supposed to do. But when I left my ministry position and my husband passed away in 2014 from a really rare form of cancer, very unexpectedly, it really sent me on a journey of my own. Um, not wanted, not a journey I wanted to go on, but really in many ways a very deeply spiritual journey. I think grief is by I don't know, just it is. When I say spiritual, I do not mean religious. I mean existential, if that's a better word, right? You're going to ask all these questions: why, um, how. We're going to wonder about things that are theoretical before that time, right? So it just sent me down this road, and I needed to make a living as well. And so as I searched for meaning and what do I do with my life now and trying to figure out my purpose. Uh, I don't know. It sort of found me. And so I went back to grad school and studied to become a therapist, a mental health counselor, and with the intention of just, mainly doing grief work, and in that, became exposed to so many people, which is not surprising, who are grieving, who are also traumatized. And so I clinically started studying sort of that intersection. Um, and so now that's really my specialty. I have a small private practice, just solo private practice in Huntsville, Alabama. And spend most of my time, not all of my clients, but a lot of my clients meet at that intersection of grief and trauma. Sometimes the grief is not always about a finite loss, like a death, but it could also be an ambiguous loss of some sort, such as being a caregiver or even a divorce or a change in vocation, anything like that. Anything, or lots of times it's multiple losses throughout their
Yeah.
life of different sorts. And so they end up in my office. And I think because my loss coincided, I don't think I've ever talked about this before.
Mm.
My loss coincided, there was an intersection in my life. Um, I left my ministry position sort of unwillingly.
Mm.
Um, it's a long story, but there was a whole staff turnover after a very difficult and very awful season at the church that I
Mm.
served in and I had helped plant. So I had that transition. That was definitely a grief. That was a loss.
Mhm.
I was going through empty nest. My mother was newly diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I am an only child. We had moved home to be like an hour. It's not like we moved like to another state, but we just moved closer down the road to be near her and to help. And then right in the middle of that, my husband was diagnosed with this very rare form of cancer no one had ever heard of, that 100 people in the United States had ever had. And um, within 2 years, he had died. So I had these multiple losses that touched so many, like all of my life. I felt like nothing in my life is the same.
Mhm.
And it it just so blew my life apart
Mhm.
that I think it gave me, and I felt so alone in that. And I
Mhm.
had a counselor and she was great. I don't remember much of what she said. She was just kind of held space while I threw up every week.
Mhm.
I just would come
Mhm.
in and like emotionally vomit on this poor woman.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it gave me such compassion for and such empathy for how loss just shreds the whole fabric of our life. Not just like, it's so much more than I miss that person, which
Mhm.
of course is terribly important. I'm not at all dismissing or like minimizing that.
Right.
It's just that it's so much more.
There's
And
no
I
hierarchy. It's just a very vast field of information
yes,
and details.
and I
Yeah.
just had no idea. And I can
Yeah.
remember going, because I went to classes because I was like, I got to figure out what's happening to me. Like I was like, what in the world? I thought I was losing my mind. And so I
Mhm.
maybe like 2 years in, I went to my first class with Alan Wolfelt, and he talked a little, very briefly discussed things like anhedonia, feeling like I just don't care anymore. I don't know how to, don't have any, the loss of that feeling of interest in life and the feeling of fatigue, emotional fatigue. And then he kind of mentioned a little something about complications in grief, which
Mhm.
I had no idea, knew none of this language, right?
Yeah.
And I went back to my therapist and I said, "Did you know that there could be like this thing called complicated grief?" And she said, "Yes, you have it." And I was like, "Oh, I mean," so I think it just was such a life altering event for me.
Mhm.
And I also realized how few resources we had. And I realized, of course, my background is the church. And so I realized we also just were ignoring the need to grieve.
Yes.
I had worked in Rwanda with genocide survivors. I had worked, and I mentioned our church tragedy. Our pastor's wife died by suicide. She was severely mentally ill.
Mm,
Um, no, I mean, we just tried to make the best, but a lot of that sort of looked in hindsight like pretending nothing happened. And so I don't know, it just left me with this recognition that this was a needed work in the world.
yeah.
Um, Maybe I wanted to provide what I didn't have, um,
Yeah.
to some degree. I don't know.
Yeah, compounded losses, I think, are one of those things that until you take time to really do some grief work, even if it's just some reflection and take a look backwards to recognize, oh, I think a lot of us are in dealing with complicated or compounded grief and just don't recognize it. We don't
Right.
necessarily say or know that something was a grief event because it wasn't a death. And so
Right.
we don't attribute what we've experienced. Now, some of us are incredibly resilient, or we have this ability that's more innate to kind of process our losses and move, even when we've had multiple back to back. But I think in the last few years, especially, I've seen a lot more people recognizing I lost this person, and then I lost my job, and then I had insecurity, which is a grief event. Like that's a fear, right? So all these little things, and then I lost this friendship, and we don't recognize the impact they have over time because they are building on each other. It's like the rug's pulled out, and then another rug that you didn't even realize was under you is pulled out, and then suddenly it just keeps happening. And you're
Well, and the
right.
more
The
losses you have, the
Yeah,
less support system you have,
yeah,
right? So if someone has lost multiple
mm,
family members, friends, however you lose that, or you move, and so you are in your physical realm of your support group, or what,
mhm,
however that looks. Well, then by the time you get to this last one, well, now not only do you have another loss, but you also have lost the people you would depend on
mhm,
for this loss.
yeah,
And I think that is, I see that a lot in my age group.
yeah,
I mean, I think it can be true at any time for anyone, but
right.
I think as we age, I mean, I don't think I'm old, but
But
older
it
than
becomes more stark. You're not
it becomes
wrong.
more, it does, because then
Yeah.
you probably you have lost more people,
Mhm.
right? And you may have just experienced more things. And so I see sort of this, now I've had this terrible loss, and now I have lost all the people I would normally turn to with this
Mm.
latest thing. And that feels, and I don't know that sometimes people can't put that into words, but that's really why they are struggling to cope in a different way than perhaps, like they may say, well, when I was in my 20s, I experienced XYZ. Had this loss. Why am I struggling more this time? And I will sometimes say, because you don't, like, let's say, I lost my mom in my 20s. I have a client that this is true for. I hear this often. I lost a parent in my 20s. Then I lost my husband in my 50s. Why am I struggling more? Now, they're different like types losses, but still, why am I struggling so much more? And I would say sometimes, well, part of the reason you may be struggling more is because you have lost the person that would have normally stood by you and would have helped you in this time. And so I think that even makes a difference. But I don't, we tend to look at losses like they're individuated,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, like I agree, I lost my mom, that's its own thing. But
Right.
that's not true, right? They accumulate, and maybe even,
Mm.
you use the word compound. Like I feel like there's a multiplicity
Yeah.
sort of effect. Um, I don't think it's like 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3.
Right. Yeah, I've worked with quite a few people who, when they realize they're dealing with a complicated scenario in their lives, I've helped them give themselves permission to say, like, you don't have to grieve all of those things at once. If you feel compelled to grieve the loss of your mom today, feel free to also set the other griefs, quote, aside and focus on what you're experiencing with that. It doesn't diminish the other losses. It doesn't elevate this one. It gives your body and your brain a chance to settle on
Right.
one thing and not be as overwhelmed as you are. Because I think about this, and I have a question for you on this front because I'm just curious
Sure.
how you'd address it. When clients, especially ones who have been involved in the church world, because that's how I got started in all of this too, not directly, but I recognized, wow, the Church of America does not know how to grieve.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely
Okay.
so.
I can help with that. I was going through the loss of my mom, and my beautiful friends and family just did not know what to do with me because I was not, like, outwardly combative, but I was more definitive and grace-based than ever. Like, I am certain that I am uncertain.
Yeah.
Everyone quit asking me for that. Anyway, so
Yes.
it's interesting because now I'm looking at clients who will say the same thing. They've gone through multiple traumas and losses, and I'll say I'll present some kind of question saying like, "Well, who would you go to? Who in your circle would you call right now if you said, 'I need someone to trust, I need someone to unpack with?'" And their immediate response is, "No one, I have no one. I'm completely alone, I have no one." How do you support the person who is clearly fixed in that mindset of, "I am the only one here,"
Yeah.
and yet they're face to face with you, so there's like that
Right.
glimmer.
Right. They are coming to counseling. And often I will say, well, the reason I do suggest finding outside support through grief counseling, support group, something,
Mhm,
something outside the family structure is because so often that people do feel like in some way misunderstood, or they feel like
mhm,
people are rushing them, or they feel like
mm.
whatever, people want them to get over it, whatever they feel, right? Or maybe
Right.
just the rest of their family is also grieving and they don't feel able to talk about it with them, or maybe they're going to burden them in some way. And so I will usually, that's when I mean, it's hard because I felt that way. And it probably wasn't true that I had no one, but I felt that I had no one that would actually could comprehend. Right. I
Mhm,
didn't feel like,
mhm,
I mean, well, I didn't have anybody else. That's mother had Alzheimer's and their husband, I was 48. His husband had just died. And uh, and I didn't really feel like anybody could understand like some of the issues with the change at like leaving my ministry position. So that combination, and then I don't think I even recognized like this empty nest piece until
mhm.
much later. But I felt like this conglomeration of how it landed. I felt, well, nobody can understand all of that. And I think that's the first thing I would say to people is people don't have to understand all of it.
Yes. Yes.
They just have to be willing to be present.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like, do you have anyone in your life that's willing to be present and perfectly present? I would say that as well, like, because we would all screw up, right? I know that
Right.
you would say the same thing. People come in and they tell you a story, and you're like, that is really horrific. And there is literally nothing good I can say right now. And
Yeah.
so we're all going to say the wrong thing or not say the right, whatever. We're
Right.
not going to handle it perfectly,
Right.
including grief professionals, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, I think that's the first thing I would say is
Mhm.
there, and also, well, it's good that you're here, right? That's where to start. And then I might start looking at resources even online or just
Oh,
books. I think even, that sounds kind of funny, but, I think books were one of the first ways I realized, oh, I'm not crazy.
yeah.
And by that, I don't mean like a book, like about grief process or whatever, right? I
Sure.
mean, like a memoir. Like
Yeah.
I read Joan Didion's A Year of Magical
Mhm.
Thinking,
Mhm.
which has actually inspired me to actually write my book.
Mm.
Um, and I remember, like this one line from it that just struck me so strongly. And I thought, like, I'm not, it's not just me. Because I
Mhm.
think so often that's what makes people feel isolated,
Right.
right? Like they think only I feel this way, only maybe no one else can understand, or maybe something's wrong with me. I think sometimes people isolate because they think, well, I think I'm doing this wrong, or I mean, maybe I'm crazy. Like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. It's
I don't
easy to
know. So
gaslight ourselves in
it
that.
is. Well, especially if we don't know what's normal, right?
Right.
Like
Expected.
I didn't know that cognitive fog was a very, very common
Right.
thing. Grief.
Right.
I literally went to the doctor and said, I think I have Alzheimer's too.
Mm.
And he kind of chuckled,
Wow.
kind of, Jan, you're just grieving. Well, I mean, I didn't
Right.
know that. I
Right.
didn't know that this utter fatigue, uh, never heard the term secondary losses. I
Right.
just don't know anything. I mean, really. And so I think the normalization is helpful for people to realize, oh, like maybe other people do feel this way. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes when they feel like I'm the only one that feels this way, then they
Mhm.
think nobody can relate. And so then they isolate a little bit. So I'll start with probably like resources, kind of normalization, looking around for support groups, connecting them with somebody that
Mhm.
another person I may know. But also I do ask, is there just somebody in your life that loves you? And
Mm.
if they can say that, then like let them try.
Yes, let them try to love you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I love that you said we don't need all the details, because that's the part where we get in the mud and say, well, no one's experienced what I've experienced, so no one knows how I feel. When the reality is, we don't necessarily, and I'm sure in your work you see this too, we don't need to revisit a trauma and relive it in order to find some resolution and bring some wholeness back into it. And to bring like, and to your point, like bring our stress level from an event down to a lower, more tolerable level. In grief support groups that I've been a part of, and whether it's been facilitating or as a partner, one thing I've always done is to say, "Hey, there are going to be stories that are really hard in this room, and there are going to be things people aren't even talking about because they're so hard. So let's be really gentle as we share our own stories to honor the delicate nature of the people in the room as well. We're all fragile right now. We're all super scared, and we are all capable of traumatizing the people around us into silence by being so brazen
Yeah.
or
Graphic.
graphic, flippant. I work with an organization that responds to death by suicide in youth in my area. And the amount of tension in those rooms it is so thick, and there's
Mhm.
so much fear about, well, I don't want to say how I'm affected by it because I'm scared that someone's going to judge me because I've had ideation as well. You know what I mean? And so it's an interesting thing to be able to validate someone's grief without them having the space to tell every detail of it.
Right.
Only because I mean, I don't validate someone's humanity because I know exactly how they got here. I validate their
Right.
humanity because they inherently deserve to be validated. And
Right.
so I think the same is true with our grief stories. The way, no matter how complicated they are, we deserve to have an audience. And let yeah, even to your point, I can think of a couple clients who would say, "No, I don't have anyone who loves me." Which
Yes.
how would you respond to that?
Yeah. That's really hard and is a true grief in itself.
Yeah.
Right. We often work on ways to find very gentle support. I try to
Mhm.
stay, I'm not as plugged in as I used to be. I try to stay more plugged in into like what is offered. Um, Usually I find out from clients. Honestly, a lot of times I'll find out from other clients, like I mean, like I'm not a professional, I'm not like a specialist about infant loss as an example, right? But I have moms that I have worked with for a while and they know. And so, and so if they're okay, we will allow. And so sometimes just finding people another loss survivor. Sometimes I have
Mhm.
done that in a way, or usually through a support group. I don't connect clients. That would probably not be something I could do, but they can tell me usually about support groups. And I have done that, and I have had people make really long lasting friendships that way. Um, had clients that had like literally no extended family and they were pretty young and lost a parent, their only parent. And I mean, it's hard though. It really is more challenging. And
Right.
I do, I never want to like foster dependence, but I'm probably going to stay on touch. Probably gonna meet with them a little more often and like touch base with them a
Sure.
little more often. And
Yeah.
probably in ways that I might not would with a client that had like a diagnosis that is pathological. I might, remember birthdays, which we're not really supposed to do, right? We're not supposed to like really be super personal in that way, but like
Personalize it.
I
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
like remember birthdays or not like a gift, but like just
Right.
remember, or just be aware that there's this hole in their life that unfortunately I can't fill, but I can be sensitive to and recognize that
Mm.
one of the hardest things after loss is not only do you have not anybody to talk to sometimes,
Yeah.
but you don't have anybody on those days, right?
Yep.
Like, I think I've had like 4 conversations this week with clients about not having any they have people in their lives that love them, but
Sure.
they've lost their mothers. They're all women,
Mm.
and they feel that loss of, like, tender care,
Yeah.
that and they, um, whatever the event was, whether they were talking about Mother's Day coming up or whether they had just had a birthday or just they had one of them had surgery, like, no one really took care of me like my mom,
Right.
and so or remembered things or
Mm.
and so, just kinda being aware that there might be a little different approach with them, um,
Mm.
and it's just really challenging because I do think that grief, we feel isolated because in some way we are. Only we ourselves have that exact relationship with that person.
Mhm. Right.
And then when we get into the broader circle, like work or church or friendship groups or whatever, well, they maybe knew the person, but they're not impacted.
Right.
The relationship was not the same. Their day-to-day life is not impacted. And so in that way, certainly, yeah, certainly there is some isolation. And then also, don't you think we tend to withdraw in grief to some degree anyway, as a way to cope? Like not like I had to withdraw just to process,
Mhm.
like, I couldn't handle everybody else's stuff.
Right.
So, I had to withdraw just almost as a way to have space. So, I mean, there is some truth to the fact that grief is isolating, and sometimes, like, I'll just encourage them to, like, do little things, like, so that you don't feel like, "Oh, I'm sitting at home by myself all the time," or whatever, like, just
Yeah.
very simple steps, like um, what do you love to do? I was a worship pastor for years. I was a vocalist forever. That was really the first thing I ever did professionally.
Mhm.
And singing into a microphone felt really hard. But I joined a little community theater. They did a thing called Black Tie Christmas, my second Christmas. And there was like 80 people, right? So if I just quit singing, nobody knew.
Everyone would know. Yep.
It's not a big deal, right?
You
It's
just
just like,
mouth watermelon. You just
yeah.
silently watermelon. It looks
I
like
was
you're
like, no one
singing.
will care if I mess up or can't. But it's also like
Right.
choir was not really I normally was in a band, and so I didn't really like that having to sing exact notes. I was like, I can do it, but it's not really so but I
Uh-huh.
did
Yeah.
it partially to force myself out of this self-imposed isolation.
Mm. Mhm.
And it wasn't like the best thing I ever did. It wasn't the worst thing, but it gave me a little chance to interact with the human
Mm.
race. Um, and that in itself was helpful.
I think that willingness to recognize I have isolated, it was intentional. Like there's a difference, right, between unintentionally isolating and recognizing, "Oh gosh, I've been alone for 6 weeks,"
Yes.
versus I need to pull back. I
Right.
cannot offer myself here. I need some seclusion to be safe and to settle and to find some ways forward that are meaningful and effective for me. And I think being able to experiment with things like that with choir or with joining a peer-to-peer support group or even trying something you've always wanted to or just practicing cultivating a walking habit with a friend or a neighbor. Those
Yes.
little experiments, I think we fear them so much because we don't see them as experiments. We see them as this is a new permanent change that I must do, even if it isn't exactly the helpful thing I think it will be. I must
Right.
stick with it, as opposed to
Like
thinking,
a commitment.
yes, like I have to commit to my neighbor walking, even if I find out, wow, I would never be friends with this neighbor in the real world. And now I'm a little nervous that they're my neighbor. We can decide, like, for ourselves what is meaningful and what helps us really to start
Right. Yeah.
finding some ground after grieving, especially with compounded losses like these. Mm.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people, like, just try something for like, I've even said, "Make a list of all the fun things you've wanted to do." Like, one of the things I did, I had not even finished my bachelor's when my husband died. I had just gone back to
Mm.
I was, like, 3/4 of the way through it. I'd worked all these years without a degree,
Mhm.
decided I just wanted to finish it because I was just for my own benefit, and then my
Mhm.
husband died. And so, uh, I needed it's an interdisciplinary degree. So you have, like, a gazillion, like, elective credits, right?
Mhm.
And so and my advisor was like, "Jan, like, take it easy, like, do something that you don't have to write a paper for, read a book for, like, take an art class." I'm like, "Well, I'm not an artist." And she said, "It doesn't matter. You could get, you still can get the credit." So I took a
Yeah.
watercolor class with a bunch of art majors and my stuff looked like a kindergartner painted it. I felt like the first day of, first grade, making a
Mhm.
mom whatever. It was like we're going to paint something for Mother's Day.
Perfect.
And then, I did manage to make an A. I finished my assignments, I will say that much.
Well
And then
done.
I took a pottery class for a couple of semesters. I did not become a professional potter. I did not become a professional artist.
See, look
But,
at that.
they were actually really kind of, I don't know, like, the expression of it that I was able to
Mhm.
express myself. I, um I found pottery and particularly to be sort of, I mean, I wasn't like great at it, but like it was, they're kind of therapeutic in some way. So I think sometimes that's what I
Mhm.
tell people, make a list, like do it once. If you hate it, don't do it again.
Yeah.
It's fine. Just find something that makes you, like in this moment, I felt a little more alive, a little more connected to the human race, a little bit out of my head, a little bit not sitting on my couch crying my eyes out every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I think that there's something very magical about even crossing to the creative side of your brain if you're a logical person and vice versa, primarily because you're right. It does take you outside of yourself. And this is that time where you can choose to do introspection and get to know yourself differently, get to know this new self. Now
Yes,
that you've experienced a new type of grief, that you have become someone new and you're becoming someone
that's
new.
right.
Or you can become very internal and say, well, I'm not going to like any of these things. And so I don't want to do that. I find that it's really interesting with clients who want to, you can tell that they want help, they want support, they want to know what to do differently, but they are so used to not being successful or not being able to define what they've accomplished as successful. They've got a
Mhm.
parameter, a bar that's too high to call something a success. Whereas you and I would look at, you mean you answered the phone when it rang? You didn't just let it go to
Yes.
voicemail?
Yeah.
That's a success. Look at
Right.
it from
You
this
took a
perspective.
shower.
Absolutely. You got yourself, there is so much mental energy and calorie output that goes into those things when grief is at the forefront of your experience, right? Not even when it's a fresh grief, not even when it's 30 years later. When it is in the forefront of your thinking, then it's important for you to pay attention to it. And I think that it's a really beautiful piece to just invite someone into a one-time thing. There's no commitment, there's no shame. You have total autonomy to say, "Nope, that was garbage, I'm out."
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've
Ah,
painted rocks. I have written songs. I have, now I am more of I would say I'm a creative thinker. I
yeah.
would not say I'm not at all an artist. Um, but I've painted rocks, I've written songs, I ended up writing a book. I have journal entries, frankly, that
Mhm.
started out just totally as me writing as my own way to process
Yeah,
these questions that I felt really kind of scared to say, or like,
yeah.
if I talk about this, people will, not understand. Um, I have, in fact, I wrote every day for 2 years. Just wrote,
Mm,
not for, not for like a purpose, just to like get it out of my head.
mhm,
Um, I have seen people use photography, use all kinds of just whatever, right? Dance. I had a client that was a dancer and she like made a dance. She chose a song and
mm,
did a dance. I mean, I don't know that she ever performed it for anybody, but she just, that's not the point, right?
mhm.
And then I've had people who have like picked up totally new things. Like they've totally, because like you said, I mean, we are altered. We are forever
Yeah,
altered by our loss, just as we
yeah,
are forever altered by having been loved by that person or loving that person, by
yeah.
their presence.
Mm. Well, Jan, I know you had mentioned that you have a new your private practice in Alabama is obviously full and for good reason, even though, of course, yes, that fluctuates week to week. But you had mentioned you're developing an online coaching course for people that might be coming up soon. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, I decided to do this for a number of reasons, but it's just a 10-week course. It includes a lot of education, videos, weekly videos, and then weekly sessions. And I decided to offer it because I do get a lot of requests from out of state, and
Mhm.
do I cannot do trauma counseling and grief counseling out of state.
Yeah.
And so I started this side business as a way to hopefully meet that need. And also, I felt like some people are really sort of like, oh, like therapy. You want me to go to therapy for grief? Like there's a
Right.
little bit of like,
There's a stigma as if there's something
yes,
wrong with
I'll go to
therapists.
coaching. I'll go to these. I like, be educated about the process or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Yeah.
so that was a part of it. And also, I'm building my cabin, which I named the sanctuary, which is not
Mhm.
completed yet. But down the road, I hope that people might come in for like a personal grief retreat. And I was
Mm.
trying to, in my mind, think how like I would need like more of a, like this is what we're going to do, day to
Right.
day instead of just
Right.
more open
More
ended.
ambiguous time for you to figure out with your life is.
Yes. And so, in a manner of speaking, I kind of, it was a way for me to sort of, that was really kind of what started it. But I really, wanted to offer more resources for people. And I felt like the idea of grief therapy shut the door for some people.
Yeah.
Not because I think it's inappropriate. Anything I do in grief coaching, we can do in grief therapy. But
Exactly.
I felt like the terminology can
Yeah.
sometimes turn people away. And
Yeah.
so it was just a sort of something I wanted to try. I hope in the future to maybe have an online grief group that I combined with that somehow.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten that far yet. So
That's
anyway,
okay. What I
yeah.
think is so spectacular about you doing that too, because I'm listening, I'm like, yeah, I agree. That's what I have. That's why I have it, is because we're all so completely different as grief specialists, right? Our professional and personal understanding, and even your training and the trainings I've gone through, they bring us to similar but different conclusions. And to your point, no one would want to simply have one specific voice and say, this is the methodology I will coach from or therapize from for the rest of my career. We all pick up pieces and realize, wow, this is really beautiful when it's married with this theology, this theory, and this methodology really is supported by this author's work. I can't wait because grief work and the research around it is it's so young and it's
Mhm.
very hard to even get higher institutions to consider the value of it to a degree in a
Right,
lot of ways too. So
right.
I love that you're doing that. And Jan, I have had such a lovely time listening to you and connecting with you today. I think that your perspective and the way that you're approaching both your clients, but also how you present yourself out there for the rest of us to see is it's just a gift. And I'm so like inspired now to go back to my clients with complicated grief and say, listen to me, people, there is hope. I am refreshed. Let's get after it. And
Yeah.
hopefully they'll be intentional and excited to come along with it too. So thank you for what you do and for being here.
Well, thank you for asking me. It really is an honor and a privilege to share. I am still, as I'm sure you would agree for yourself, probably, I'm still on the grief journey.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't believe it will ever end. I believe that I mean, I don't mean that in a hopeless way. I think that is I will go back to my favorite quote about grief.
Mm,
Megan Devine said, some things cannot be fixed, they can only be carried.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
so, I just remind myself of that every day because I still am learning to integrate my own losses into my life. My mother has passed away since my husband did.
Mm,
Um, and my father is 80. My aunt that I have been sort of taken over her care, uh, she's bedbound.
yeah.
Like a second mother. So, I mean, like,
Mm,
life is full of loss. We are always adapting and always being changed by it. And so it's my journey as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not just my client's journey. Perhaps that's what makes it so special to me in some ways, is that it's a human experience.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for listening to episode 87 of Restorative Grief. Jan's experience as a griever and grief professional is so relatable to me. Complexity and gray space is something in grief that we try to minimize in our own stories while we look for healing. And I deeply appreciate that she shared her own experience of learning how instead to use that nuance in loss and see how it was affecting and impacting her life. See, grief work is nothing to shy away from. There are so many supportive options available beyond this show. So if you find yourself living in a grief desert, meaning not a lot of people around to help, or struggling to gain connection with someone in your area, please reach out to the show because I want to help resource you as best I can. Grief work can always be as casual as Jan described, or as intentional and focused as you need. If this is your first time listening, thank you for being here. You can become a premium subscriber of the show and receive bonus content by visiting our show notes for links to those benefits via Spotify or through Patreon. And there is a special workbook for patrons who want to work more intentionally through the weekly episodes. So if that's you, I highly recommend that you check it out. Please remember to also subscribe to the show wherever you're listening and leave a helpful review for listeners who need to know that this is an excellent resource for their journey. And as always, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.